Hi guys, welcome to the channel. It has been since 2015 when I had modified my very own Seiko SKX007. That was a while ago. I really wanted to get into modifying and building Seikos once again. Namoki Mods has this fantastic DIY watch kit that I wanted to check out, and they have sent me the parts. I have here the watch hands, neatly packed and safely stowed away. And inside these little blue containers, neatly packaged and tucked away, I quite like what they've done, is the movement of the watch, which is an NH35 movement, and the dial of the watch neatly tucked away and safely packed. In the other blue container, we have the other components necessary to build the watch, which is the stainless steel case and an exhibition case back, as well as a snowflake rotor that I customized, I personally wanted. They also sent me a 19mm calf grain black leather strap. Back in 2015 when I built my SKX, I had used the worst off-the-shelf tools I could find. We're talking pen, pencil, Swiss Army knife, anything I could find around the house. Namoki Mods has a DIY toolkit as well that I find will be much better for what I'm trying to do. You have a set of hand removal tools and screwdrivers, as well as tweezers, a case back opener, and also a case back opener with a flat edge, and also a spring bar tool. Moving along, we have the individual hand placement tools, the movement holder, and more importantly, Rotico for managing the dial and putting the hands on the dial. This is a very complete kit, and I have to admit, much better than using your at-home tools you could find. Though I found the Namoki Mods toolkit to be fairly complete, I wanted to make my job easier. I have this modeler side cutter that is used to trim off the dial feet. They're normally used for plastic, but they're hard enough to get the job done. In terms of the movement holder that came with the toolkit, the Namoki Mods is pretty decent, it will serve the purpose, but to make my job easier, I actually went ahead and bought a dedicated NH35 movement holder, allowing me to place the movement, dial up or movement facing down, and remove it with ease. Here I also have a movement cushion, which is a nice soft surface to allow the movement to rest on the cushion while you're working on the dial, and as well as a vise tool that allows me to screw on the crown stem to the crown with relative ease. Now, a bit of forewarning, I am no expert. I'm far from it. Like I said, I haven't built a watch since 2015. So first, let's get the movement onto the movement holder, a quick check to ensure that the time setting function and also the date function is fully working, and it appears to be the case with this one. A watch is not complete without its face, and that would be the dial. Namoki Mods has sent me in this neatly little packed square a forest green enamel no date dial intended for use with NH35 movements. This might look familiar to you. If you're familiar to the Seiko Elegance lineup, then you would have seen this no date configuration with these baton indices. Let's check out how lush and deep this green dial is. Being enamel helps with the gloss factor of this dial. As I go in to place the dial on the movement, I notice that you can't, because the dial feet need to be trimmed. On the NH35 movement, there are little divots to place the dial on the movement itself. So let's get into it. Taking a look at the orientation on the movement, it suggests that we should cut off the first of the dial feet on the left hand side, and then on the opposing side we cut off the second dial feet. I would highly recommend you get some finger cots or wear gloves to prevent marring the dial. Now, I did have to file down the dial feet ever so gently with a metal file that I had found from a home hardware store. Doing this will allow the dial to rest perfectly flat on the movement, which is important, as if it doesn't rest perfectly on the movement, you will get some wear along the dial where the dial will sit and be pushed up against the case of the watch. Having very carefully filed down the excess metal from trimming the dial feet, we place it on the movement ever so carefully, ensuring that we line up the dial feet with the holes in the movement. Now, as you see here, it took me a couple of attempts. Go slow, don't rush this process. This is where you may end up dropping the dial or scratching it if you're not careful. I did in fact notice out of the package that the dial did have a bit of traces of dust on it, so using a dust blower and very gently blowing it around the dial, I'm able to remove most of the debris and dust that's left over. And for the more stubborn marks, I would use Rotico here, roll it down to a flat surface whereby you can just gently dab it onto the dial. Now I'm going to use the Rotico to actually set the hands, so let's get that started. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I want to pay close attention to the hand setting tools that were included in the kit. There are different sizes that you have to pay attention to. I will start off with the black tool and use the green tip and work my way towards the other tools, as you'll see here. Now, if you haven't done this before, setting the hands is the most stressful part of assembling the watch, in my point of view. It's a very delicate job. Go slow. With the Rotico, place the hands on its edge and line it up with the post and allow it to rest, ever so gently, making sure that you're picking up the hands with the Rotico. Now with the black hand setting tool, I'm going to use the green tip here to just gently press in the hour hand, which is the hand that goes in first, to line up on the post. This isn't a marathon. Go slow. You have to pay careful attention to the way that the hands sit on the post. If you push straight down, you might notice that the hands are sitting crooked. Then you want to maybe push on the lower side where the hands are sitting lower in order to reorient the hands on the post. You want them to be as straight as possible. It may take several attempts to do so. I would highly recommend watching a couple of YouTube videos and guides on which tool to use in terms of setting the hands, just so that you are matching the careful size of the hands to the right hand setting tool, not to bend your hands. That after multiple attempts, I'm pretty happy with the way the hour hand is sitting on the post. I'm going to move on now to setting the minute hand. Once again, very carefully picking up the edge of the minute hand on its tip with the Rotico and gently placing it onto the post just at an angle. You want to ensure that the minute hand would slide off, but not fall off the post to the point where now it's sitting on the dial and you've got to pick it back up. It's okay. Trust me, my hands were shaking. I was sweating at this part, but I seemed to make it out just fine. Now that the hands are sitting on the post but not quite set in place, I'll move on to the next tool here, which is to use the silver tool, hand setting tool, with the black tip. Now I noticed the black tip is slightly smaller than the black tool that I've used previously with the green tip. This will allow me to push on the minute hand just enough to place it on the post carefully without damaging it. Once again, you're going straight down, decent pressure, not too hard and not too light. In this attempt, I noticed that I pushed on the minute hand a little bit too hard, to the point where the minute hand is actually a little bit offset, not perfectly at 12 o'clock. More or less, you can make the adjustments if necessary, but be very gentle with this process. I use the tip of the tool to just line it up ever so slightly, not putting any force on it at all. Just going back to make sure that I have placed the hand correctly on the post, I'm just going to give one more gentle push to ensure that it's properly seated. Upon closer visual inspection, I've noticed that the minute hand is just ever so slightly too close to the hour hand, and this is where the next trick comes in, which is to use the included dial protector to gently wedge between the two hands and curve the dial protector ever so slightly upwards, not applying too much pressure, to gently just give space and clearance to the minute and hour hand. Now, you won't scratch the hands because the Bergeron dial protector is made out of very soft, pliable plastic, and the hands are metal. As you can see here, in doing so, I moved the minute hand ever so slightly, but the clearances are acceptable. I'll go back off screen to tidy this up. Using our vise tool, let's attach the crown stem to the crown itself. We will screw the crown stem to the vise tool, tightening it up to ensure it won't move around. And then from there, we will carefully slide it through the crown and apply adequate pressure to screw it into place. Now that it's done and set, I do want to preface by saying you could apply some Loctite to ensure that it will not go anywhere. I didn't have any on hand, but I'll revisit this another time. The supplied NH35 movement does come with a crown and crown stem. I'll remove that, and then we can get started on the next component, which is talking about the case of the watch. We'll remove the movement and let's get started here. So what I'm using is a 37mm wide Grand Seiko Elegance like case that is part of Namoki's custom case designs. This one drew my attention because the smaller form factor, but also the fact that it just looks really appealing. We'll remove some of the dust and debris with Rodeco, and then we'll blow out the dust remaining. Then we'll move forward with casing the movement and dial. This is where my lack of experience and being rusty really shows. Lining up the movement in the case is not an easy task, but there are little cutout holes where the movement holder was purposely cut out for the crown to sit inside of the movement. Lining that up with the crown tube is essential in getting the movement to sit properly. You can make micro adjustments, but there's only so much you can do. Now, notice that the movement had some difficulty sitting inside of the case. You had to use very generous amounts of pressure to get the case or to get the movement to sit inside of the case properly. With that done, let's now install the crown that we have just set up here and applying some decent pressure to have it sit in place. Next up, we have to remove the NH35 rotor to install our custom rotor. A flathead screwdriver applied to the center of the bearing with a couple of turns, adequate pressure will remove it freely. Be very careful you don't damage the bearings, set it aside safely. Now preparing the custom rotor, it's a matter of just lining up the center bearing and using a flathead screwdriver to apply a couple of turns to tighten the rotor to the movement. And there it is, sitting nicely and pretty inside the case. I think the snowflake rotor is a perfect match to this Grand Seiko Homage. We'll tighten up the exhibition case back with this rubber ball for now, and here it is on the wrist. The 37mm case sits very nicely on my 6.5-inch wrist. It does have a sapphire crystal up front with hardly any anti-reflective coating that I can see. Being 37mm wide with a lug-to-lug length of 44.3mm means that this watch sits very compactly on my wrist. The case feels great, and I think that the overall simple design makes this watch a perfect DIY dress watch of my dreams. Some of you very sharp-eyed viewers might have noticed it's missing a seconds hand, and that is because I bent the crap out of the seconds hand trying to place it on the post. And then I decided that, okay, I think it actually looks pretty decent without the seconds hand, so let's just rock with it. Now the case is really a shining point of this watch and completes it as a whole. Fully stainless steel with drilled lug holes and 19mm lugs really makes it quite similar to the Grand Seiko Elegance line of watches, which I really admired in terms of a compact dress watch. However, I noticed that Grand Seiko did not have an enamel green dial or Grand Seiko Elegance just yet, so I figured why not build my own. One area of improvement is the instructions that Namoki has sent with the watch kit. I do wish that it was more involving and including a video guide of sorts. I felt like the instructions, they are simple to follow, but a video guide is so helpful. However, the kit itself, the quality of the parts were excellent. Would I recommend this kit? Yes, I would, but with some caveats. I would highly recommend getting the additional tools just to make your life a little bit easier if you really wanted to. Now, in terms of getting the job done, you'll be fine with the supplied toolkit. I do think that the completed product is a handsome piece, though it's not the manual wind Grand Seiko Elegance. I can live with that. Thank you Namoki Mods for helping me out with this video and sponsoring it. If you guys are interested in this toolkit, you can check out their parts and assemble your own on the website at Namoki Mods. This particular kit was not an exact DIY kit. I had assembled the parts and they had recommended to get the toolkit as well, and that's how this came to be. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.